Welcome to Generating Gratitude, a look at personal growth in a grateful life. What follows is not professional advice or medical recommendation, but stories and perspectives about living with gratitude. Now, here is your host, Joe Volk.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another blazing edition of Generating Gratitude. Grateful for my friends at Connoisseur Media that let me do this every week. And as we start out our show every week, one consistent message. Can't be hateful and you can't be grateful at the same time. Last week I talked about gas station heroin, the Kratom. And this week I have Melanie on with us, and Melanie was addicted to that and had a hell of a time getting off of it. Melanie, welcome to Generating Gratitude.
Hello. Happy to be here.
Explain to everybody what it is.
Okay. Kratom is an herb or a plant that is grown in Southeast Asia. It's got a history of use there that's very different than what we're seeing here now. You can find it at smoke shops, gas stations, all over the place. But because it is a very wholly unregulated market, they're making all sorts of powerful products. The leaf on its own can be dangerous, can be addictive, and cause problems for itself. But some of these new products we're seeing are really, I would say, way too intense for the general populace to be able to handle. And they come with a lot of scary health risks.
Now, when you started on it, did you know of the risks, or was it just kind of an innocent, oh, I need an energy boost?
Yeah, I did not know all the risks. And I didn't, when I first tried one, I didn't think that this was something that I was going to be taking, regularly. So I guess the appraisal of risk at that point in time was a little different, right? Whether you're trying something on a one-off or whether you think it's going to be a part of your everyday life. I did do a little research. Feel Free, that's the company. It makes these little 2-ounce drinks that are available all over, and that was what I initially started using and got hooked on. And they were very, very predatory with their marketing. They made it look so healthy, and actually there was a lawsuit several years ago because they were saying it was a safe, sober, healthy alternative to alcohol. That's the exact quote on their website.
Yeah, and they market it like it's, hey, it's a harm, like a 5-hour energy. Hey, here you go.
Exactly. But even cleaner, right? Because everybody's into plant medicine nowadays. And I heard they were selling these at, Erewhon. You can find them at food co-ops and chiropractors' offices. So there was a lot of really confusion, I guess, about what this truly was early on. And so at that point in time, I did a little bit of research after I, tried, or probably before I tried the first one. I saw a bunch of ads during my pregnancy, and then, after I gave birth, it came to mind thinking like, oh, maybe I'll try one of those for energy. And, my experience was that it's extremely strong stuff, and you can definitely find enough people out there that are going to tell you that it's completely safe, that it's harmless, can't get addicted like that all these stories of harm and risk are blown out of proportion. You can find enough information to pretty much convince yourself that you're doing something okay.
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of what I'm doing, trying to share my story, is really just get the word out there that it's like there's so many people saying this story over and over. It's completely safe. It's completely harmless. It's just not. That's not in line with the truth. Right.
I'm a 40-year recovering alcoholic. It's kind of like the way they market beer. Yeah, sit down with your friends, have a beer. What? It's a harmless thing. One beer. It's friends. Yeah. It's fellowship. It's this. It's that. And for me, then it turned into oh.
Exactly.
So how did you get hooked?
Well, so I think I was at a particularly vulnerable period. I was 4 weeks postpartum. And so, when you're not sleeping well, I think we all go through periods where our decision making is a little bit less than when it's at its best. But I got one and it works really great. And then a week later, I tried another one, and so on and so forth. And it really was only 3 weeks until my body started kind of begging for these on its own. And I had no experience with addiction like that before. So it was scary, but I was in a little bit of a desperate phase of life at that time. And it totally washed me away downriver, like full on addiction before I even knew what was happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Your story is kind of parallel to people that get hooked on painkillers.
Yes.
It's the the doctor prescribed these. I started taking them, and then I started leaning on them, and then before I knew it, I had a problem.
Yes, and that's what. Yes, because it works on the opioid receptors. It is very similar to that, and I think that's a particular danger of opioid use disorder, which is what I eventually had to be treated for. It's got a really, really, really high relapse rate because, as you know,
yes.
It's an addiction. Your brain, body, they have their own little script that they run with once you introduce these substances. So, yeah, after a few weeks, it really was. There's no rationality to the use or any of it, but that's the truth of addiction.
And where did you purchase yours?
Kind of all over, to be honest. I was a little embarrassed about how often I was buying it, but it was at a corner store close to my house, just like a half mile down the road. Started selling it, and so it's just like very easy to pop in and get one. But they carry them at, they were selling them at 7-Elevens for a while. Recently, Circle K gas stations have all started carrying them and other similar products. So they're very readily available for anybody who,
Yeah, I find that incredible, and that this is even unregulated. It's like basically you can buy opiates without prescriptions, no age restrictions. Anybody can do this.
I know. It is really mind-boggling. And that's where, I find it a little interesting in terms of talk around the ban. And there are a lot of people that really praise Kratom for its pain relief and other things. And it's like, I just don't know where we lost sight of the fact that pain relief management should not be happening at the gas station, at the smoke shop.
Yes.
Those are not proper, regulated spaces for this kind of product. They're
right.
Really not. So
the readily available, anybody can walk in today and buy it.
Yes, it's something that's so difficult for the people that get swept away with this stuff. There's a Reddit subreddit about quitting feel free with over 10,000 users, and it's like most of them are just kind of praying that it gets banned in their state because they have no idea how else to stop themselves.
Right.
It's really sad.
Right. It's addiction.
Yes.
And
I know people will draw similarities to alcohol in that, but I think alcohol is something that's been so normalized by our society, and we have such a long history. Maybe the train has left the station in terms of us being able to regulate that properly, but that doesn't mean that that's true for Kratom.
Right.
We're just facing the beginning of an epidemic there as far as addiction goes.
Well, and like with alcohol or with cocaine or with meth, or you know what you're getting into.
Exactly.
You know that when you drink, there's a possibility, remote as it might be, that you become an alcoholic. When you're doing meth, you know that bad stuff is going to happen. This stuff is just available at a gas station, and kind of like you just inadvertently pick it up and just, oh my God.
Yeah. Yes, it's really astounding to me. And I think that is part of the hardest part of this addiction for me is it's a whole new kind of world. It's a whole new group of addicts in a sense, because these are people who weren't, they weren't throwing caution to the wind and going out, to try street drugs or something else that they, knew the risks of. And in some ways, the proponents of Kratom, the people that say it's so safe, they're the most dangerous part about it, because they kind of, they're getting a whole lot of people to follow them into this horrible addiction. And it takes people years and years and years to come out of. Yes,
it's kind of an addiction machine. We need you to, it's the way tobacco companies give out free samples, because they need people addicted, because that's how they make their money. Melanie, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to discuss your recovery, because you have an amazing story of recovery from this. Again, you're listening to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Joe, your host. My guest is Melanie. She got hooked on Kratom, which is basically what we like to call gas station heroin. Melanie, when you knew you had a problem, how long did it take for you to get help? There's always that gap. I knew that I had a problem with alcohol, but it took a while for me to actually do something about it. What was your gap like?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I had kind of two major periods of use. One was after the birth of my daughter, who's 3, and one was after the birth of my son, who is 1. Apparently, postpartum Melanie doesn't make some kind of desperate decisions. But so the first time around, I really never sought help. I didn't know what I was dealing with. I was trying over and over and over and over to quit on my own. I think when people don't know what you're talking about, when you say, hey, I'm addicted to this stuff, it's really frustrating. And there certainly weren't a lot of rehab programs available. I think, I brought it to a couple of my doctors, and when they were unaware of what it was, I think that kind of shut me down a little bit. But eventually my family, it's about 9 months in, my family kind of came together and basically between my husband and my parents and my siblings, everybody kind of did an intervention on me, and I was able to stop. And I had quite a period of sobriety there. And then when I eventually relapsed, after my son was born, that was a situation where there was a lot more help available at that time. So, a few months in, I started looking around trying to find rehab that would treat Kratom addiction. But what ended up, because at the same time, right, like the addiction is also growing in strength. So I think some of us do this thing where we reach out for help a little bit and then go back full force into the addiction, or, kind of waffle on the recovery for a little bit. But I'm so grateful it happened this way, but I had to fully lose my mind. I had to get off of it because I went to Indiana to my in-laws' house to, go cold turkey off of Kratom.
Yep.
My husband was there with me, and I lost all sense of reality. And this is not something that's normal for me, but I was suicidal, and my husband had to call the police, and I ran from them and hid. I was fighting. I did not want to go into the hospital, but that involuntary hospitalization and that detox, I think that totally saved my life. And from that point in time, I was able to kind of get the mental clarity to fight for my recovery a little stronger. I had one relapse since then in August, and then I started Suboxone prescription after that, and I have been sober ever since. But yeah, it's been a long road. There's been lots of relapses, lots of trying different things, and I'm just so grateful to be on this side of it.
Well, we talk about this on this show. Recovery isn't. People have recovery wrong. They think it's a Disney movie where you go and you do 30, 60, 90 days, you come out and life is good again, and oh wow, I'll never think about using or drinking or whatever ever again, and we lived all happily ever after. That's not the case.
Yeah. No, it's not.
That's far from it. I wish it was the case, but it's far from it. Now, when you did rehab, what rehab finally stuck?
I ended up doing a little outpatient program after my detox at Pine Rest and in Grand Rapids, and that was really wonderful. And then I ended up following their program, doing several hours a week of group therapy afterwards. And so Pine Rest, I think they pretty much follow the basic AA model, for their groups and everything. But something about being able to make the relationships, in person with the program, and connect with professionals, doctors, therapists, and then carry through. That really was helpful for me, more so than just like trying to drop into an NA meeting or whatever. Which I know, those can be super helpful to a lot of people, and they are. But I think for the most part, it's really about making the relationships that you carry out of there, meeting people in a similar situation, and building up a community for yourself.
Yep. We stay sober. I get high.
Exactly.
So we're going to wrap this up in just a second, Melanie. I want to talk to you about your gratitude, because when I talk to you, you're so grateful now. And one of the great things about talking to people who have basically lost everything is when they come back. They're wonderful to talk to because they're so grateful, because you lost family, you lost friends, kids, and now you're back. Yeah.
Truly, that was something that I remember weeping about this in my hospital bed, looking, processing everything that I had gone through, and then realizing that I still was so blessed to have my entire support system still around me. My marriage was certainly challenged, but my husband was still there. I'm sure it was a difficult period for my children at times, but they're really thriving. And nobody in my family, nobody in my friends, nobody left me high and dry once they learned the truth. And in a lot of ways, that's actually helped me to receive love, feel love from people close to me better than I ever did before I, messed up massively and had this huge addiction. So the vulnerability of being able to be just a human being that's kind of a mess at times, or that has struggles, and then still be loved for it, is something so meaningful. And that's actually, a gift of this whole thing. That it's like, I don't know if I would necessarily throw the whole struggle out if I had to get rid of the lessons that came with it.
Sometimes that past that we have is our most valuable tool of today, because it's not the past is stagnant. We use that as a reference point now, and a learning lesson that I was there. I went through hell. Now I know what hell is like. Now I'm using that to thrive now.
Yeah. I mean, it has really strengthened my relationship with God, my higher power, and it's such a crazy mystery how that all works, how, struggle is turned into pain and strength and beauty, and recovery really is one of the most beautiful things I think a person can go through, but it comes after some real ugliness. So
yeah,
it's wild that way.
You have to. Yeah, there's no shortcut. I wish there was, but there's no shortcut. All right, Melanie, we got about a minute left. What? Give me 3 things you're grateful for.
Well, I'm grateful for being able to use my voice to, just share the message here and help other people that were struggling. As I was struggling, it means a lot to me. I'm grateful for my fully intact support system, like I just said. And I am so grateful that all the 10 feet of snow we had here in the UP has finally melted.
This is one of the great things I like about people in recovery is the sense of humor. We've learned to laugh again.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with you.
When we were in active addiction, everything was so serious and so... Melanie, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you again for Kratom, calling this to light, because I knew nothing about it a couple of weeks ago. And now I read all this stuff and I read your story, and we got to do something about it. Thank you very much, Melanie, for being on the show.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
You're listening to Generating Gratitude. This is with Joe. We'll be right back here on WSGW.
Now it's time for more great moments in gratitude with your host, Joe Volk.
Welcome back to Generating Gratitude. Still Joe, still your host. And it's still true, you can't be hateful and grateful at the same time. My guest for the second half of the show is my friend Lori, and Lori's going to talk about trauma and being able to overcome trauma and recover and live in gratitude. Lori, welcome to Generating Gratitude.
Thank you for having me, Joe. So good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, how do I say this? I haven't told it in detail in a long time, but I was basically raised by 2 very narcissistic, very traumatized young people. So they were 19, 20 when they had us kids, right? My mom and dad. And they were both alcoholics. They were both, suffering severe abandonment issues from their parents abandoning them. It was a nightmare, right? So we lived with, alcoholism, physical abuse, extreme poverty, the fear of the guy pounding on the door coming to turn off the utilities, things like that. And I saw an opportunity to get out of the situation when I turned 15, and we had a huge upset with my mom. And she sent us off to an aunt that lived in Michigan, which is where I live now, at 15 years old. And my sister and I both went. I stayed with my aunt. My sister went back to my mom. I stayed with my aunt, and I essentially jumped from the frying pan into the fire. When I got there, I was a 15-year-old, very kind of freaked out. I came with the clothes on my back. My aunt lived in a very wealthy community. She had just lost her husband she was 36 years old, taking on someone else's, traumatized 15-year-old. And she had a family of friends that took good care of her and helped her through the death of her husband, and she had a 2-year-old daughter. Well, I was 15, and this family was also alcoholics, and they had older sons, and they took advantage of me sexually, got me drunk, and did things like that to me. So essentially, I went off to college at 18, no parenting, no real parenting, all on my own.
Yeah, because that's going to be good, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know how to live because these people didn't know how to live, right? They didn't know how to live good, solid lives because they had all been traumatized My aunt was my father's sister. She'd lived in the same conditions as a child as he did. So it was just this whole like trauma thing. And I always say I grabbed my branch off the family tree and I ran down the road with it and planted it in the middle of a big field and started over again. Because I decided, and this is the best part of my story, I think, I'm a white girl from the suburbs. When I was in 4th grade, I had a black male teacher, Mr. Stevens. And Mr. Stevens was happy, optimistic, grateful, loving. He was love in human form. And at 9 years old, I remember standing in my bedroom going, I'm not going to be like those people out there screaming and fighting with each other in the living room. I'm going to be like him. So at 9 years old, I decided I was going to be like my teacher.
Yes.
Well, fast forward to college. College, of course, with all the alcohol that our kids on campuses consume and all the crazy culture things, right? I didn't really become a better person until I got out of college. And my first boss was a black man, Mr. David Laster. Taught me everything I knew about business. I was so blessed to work for him. Got me out of my trauma drama, said, you need to go to therapy, did all these things. He was my boss, but he was a wonderful human being. Again, love in human form. We all get the people that we need along the way, but you got to recognize them when you see them, if they're coming to help you, right?
Yep.
Because I am very grateful. I think a lot of people were sent to me along the way. My first boss in college when I was 18, she was 36 at the time. She's now a very dear friend. She's 83. I'm 63. She's 83. She's my family, and she's the one that really, really got me into therapy to say, you don't have to feel this way all the time. You can change it. And so I started going to therapy while I was in college, continued afterwards. And it's kind of a lifelong journey, Joe. I really think so.
Yes.
Because some of the things, if your childhood is that traumatic, there's a lot of little things that get buried, little beliefs that you have based on that get in your way. And I was just diagnosed with ADHD at 58. So, there's those kinds of things that come up. And now I live with incredible happiness. I do not allow people that want to abuse me based on the fact that they haven't healed their own trauma. I don't allow them in my circle. And I'm very careful to have appropriate boundaries and the right amount of gratitude to keep myself going in the right direction,
Your story brings up a great point, Lori. There's a saying that hurt people hurt. Yeah. They hurt other people, right? Correct. It's that perpetual, it's what you broke. It's that cycle of,
yes.
Of if you're hurt, you're more likely to hurt others. And it's so difficult, as you mentioned, to just break that cycle. That's why, years of alcoholics. I've sit in enough meetings. I sit in enough meetings with, my grandfather was an alcoholic, my mother, my father, my siblings. It's so tough to break that cycle.
It is. It's really tough, and it's a constant effort. And I'm not going to call it a battle, because I could have stopped 20 years ago and just kept being that person, right? And I would have been better than I was at 20, at 40, right? Well, here I am at 60. I'm not completely happy with who I am yet.
Right.
And I don't mean that in a perfection way, but I really don't want to ever snipe at my husband. So if I do, I've got to take the time and go, okay, why did I do that? What was that? And how do I stop myself next time? Because he's the most wonderful, I've been married 23 years, most wonderful man in the whole world. Why would I ever want to make him feel bad? Because I feel bad, right? So it's an ongoing effort to be that person. But I also have some great role models. Again, I had that 4th grade teacher. He was love in human form. I had a great grandmother, Ollie Bowden, love in human form. So I've had these people, and I think about them and go, that's what I really aspire to, is to be that loving individual. And you got to get your head trash out of the way to really be that, right?
One of the things that I will talk about this all the time that normies don't understand is recovery isn't static. It isn't like an illness where you go into the hospital, they give you antibiotics, and you come out and you're all better and you live happily ever after. Recovery is more like diabetes, where you have to keep taking your insulin because if you don't, you're going to die.
Exactly. There's a reason you brush your teeth every day. Right?
Wouldn't that be nice?
And I also have done some really interesting personal growth work that I find has really helped me. I did some landmark education work. Have you ever heard of them?
Yep.
Oh, the best thing they ever taught me was the first thing that I just love is there's what happens to you, and there's the story you tell yourself about what happened to you, and then you react. So that story is where your power is. So you can, when somebody acts crabby to you, you can go to, oh my God, they're such a jerk, they're so horrible, or you can go, wow, they must have had a really bad morning. You can reframe what happens.
Well, it's when I was practicing using, or when I'm in a dry drunk behavior, I become very, very selfish. And I don't look at it from, I can tell when I'm living in gratitude because I'm, like you had mentioned, I'm looking at it from another person's perspective. When I'm being hateful, it's all me. It's how do you affect me? How does this affect my day? And you're screwing my life up.
Yep, that's it. And that you can overcome what happened to you in the past. You can write a different story for yourself. I write the story regularly that I learned so much from coming from that background in how to be empathic, how to be sympathetic and not be, how to be a loving, compassionate human being, because I had the best examples of how not to be. And I had to get sober to be able to be that. I had to get sober.
Amazing how sobriety works.
Oh, yeah. Because you want to kill your pain. And my mother taught me that alcohol is the most incredible anesthetic, except for it makes every single problem you ever had worse. And so it took me a while to get that. And now I've been sober. I had 2 rounds of sobriety. One's 10, one's about another 10. So my adult life, I've got 20 years of sobriety, 10 years behind me now. And it's amazing. You can't heal the way you need to if you're still consuming the substances that cause you to, be abusive. So.
All right, Lori, we're going to take a quick break. Lori is my guest, talking about trauma and recovery. You're listening to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Welcome back to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Joe, your host. Lori, my guest, talking about her trauma. Now, Lori, one of the difficult things about recovery, or at least it was for me anyway, was settling the past. Because there's once you get sober and once you've had a little bit of time of sobriety, you suddenly get this self-awareness, this like, oh my God, oh boy, the guilt and the shame and the, how did you deal with it?
Well, I carried a load of shame with me for decades. And I mean, well, let's talk about the sexual abuse. That was, to me, the most difficult thing. I was 15 years old. And as a 15-year-old, you kind of feel like you're an adult. So you think you have agency. You do. But then on the other hand, all this stuff had to be kept secret. So there was a shame factor. Well, fast forward to my son, my 15-year-old son. When my son turned 15, I looked at him and went, oh my God, he's a child. I was not responsible for that. And it wasn't until then that I fully understood. And I had to dig in again and get all through that, just dig in and talk about it and pull it out into the sunlight. And I'd never done that. And I carried a huge burden of shame because I didn't understand. And once I did, it's like I had to start all over healing that specific trauma.
Yes.
And understand, no, honey, you were a child. You were a child who was given alcohol and taken advantage of. And if anybody had done that to my 15-year-old son, I would have reacted appropriately, and that person would be in jail, right? So it's, but to look at it from that perspective, you really do, in my opinion, have to dig into your stuff. And people say, I don't want to talk about that. That happened a long time ago. But in describing it to a therapist, bringing it up, talking about it at, meetings or whatever works for you is what's going to help you figure out what those beliefs are that are completely wrong. And until you talk about it, I think they're kind of like spaghetti mess in your brain, right?
Yes.
They're all kind of gobbled up. But then once you have to describe it, you have to make it make sense to put it in words. And I found myself saying to a therapist, oh, well, I knew what I was doing. Honey, you were a child. You didn't know what you were doing.
Yeah.
But I thought I did, but you didn't. And so that belief that I carried with me until I was like 58 years old, that was my fault. I was a dirty, gross person. And I told my family. I told the family at that point, my aunt and my cousin that I lived with when I was in high school. Oh, well, they used it against me.
Of course.
That's the fun part.
That never happens well when you bring that up, and that's one of the reasons why support and therapy is important, because when you talk about that stuff, it's not, you don't get the reaction that you had thought you were going to get.
And you're also sharing your private things that can be so explosive if brought up. And my family actually told the man who abused me's ex-wife and then invited her to a wedding that I attended. And
Thanks.
she confronted me in the food line. Yeah. Confronted me in the food line and said, I heard what Tom and his friends did to you when you were in high school. And needless to say, that was another trauma, right?
Yes.
But what it did was it forced me, because it was such a shame storm, it forced me into looking at those family members were not looking out for me.
No.
By doing that, by telling. And so they're no longer a part of my life, because I realized, it's been 5 years now. I realized how much of my trauma I continue to be re-traumatized by being in relationship with them, because they thought that was perfectly okay. And when you're born into a family
Right.
that has a lot of toxic trauma and toxic energy to heal, you may have to leave that community. What do they say? What do they say in AA? Stay away from wet places and wet faces.
Yes. Yes.
I would say stay away from people who don't, from people that don't have boundaries.
Yeah.
And people who don't appreciate yours.
It's kind of like the when alcoholics ask me, wow, should I go to a bar? And I give them the typical Joe. Well, you know what? Surgeons probably shouldn't juggle knives.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't go to the bar.
Right, and it's tough to divorce yourself from your family.
It's horrible.
But you have to stay alive.
Yeah.
You can't go back to sick places, because we're only as sick as our secrets.
Exactly. Oh, that's so very true. Yeah, I love all those AA sayings. They really do.
Yes.
Keep you going when you need them. My favorite is acceptance is the answer to everything that disturbs you.
Yep. And it sucks.
There's not really one situation that doesn't apply to, and it sucks.
And it sucks because it's like, damn it, acceptance. I don't want to accept.
Exactly. I don't want life on life's terms. Life on Lori's terms.
Right. It's like, what is this? This stupid saying. And they're all correct.
I know, but they are. I absolutely got to say, if you are fighting a substance abuse issue and you are afraid of the 12-step program, Go in there with open arms, open heart. You will be shocked at how much you will learn and how you can get sober. People are so committed to your sobriety when you go to groups. I mean, it really is amazing. And anybody who's repelled by it, keep giving that up till you can get in front of those chairs. You know, get your what do you say? Get your feet under the tables.
Yep. Well, it's we stay sober. I get drunk. That power of community, that power of sitting in a room with head nodders, and those head nodders are. I can tell my story, and they're just nodding. Yep, done that, been there. You don't have to explain yourself to those folks.
And and trust me, your bottom, you may think your bottom is horrific. There's somebody else sitting there with a lower bottom than you got.
Oh, yeah.
You know, there is. There's no competition. There's no competition for the bottom of the bottom. We all have them.
Oh, Lori, we got just a few seconds left. If you could, give me 3 things that you're grateful for.
I am grateful for my strong and healthy marriage. I am grateful for my my strong and healthy small family. We're very tight. We communicate very well. We're very happy. And I'm grateful for people like you that spread the good word out there and help people understand that you don't have to live your trauma. You can move past it. Thank you for that.
Did you ever think it was going to be this good? Even your worst days now. It's being able to find able to find gratitude in almost every situation.
Absolutely, and you can always find it. If you are struggling, write a list of 10 things you're grateful for. You may have to struggle to get those last 3. It'll be well worth it.
Yeah, I've written down. I do my list every morning, and it's amazing. Sometimes it's an extensive list. Other times it's, I have a car, I have a house, I have a job, and I have
food.
Yes, I have people that care about me. So if I didn't come home at night, they would send somebody out to look for me.
Exactly. Aren't we lucky?
It's a good life. Lori, thank you very much for joining us today on Generating Gratitude. Your story is amazing, and especially how you broke that chain, that trauma chain, because family trees sometimes are in a circle, and you don't have to. You can break that chain. You can break free. You can live in recovery and find gratitude. And Lori, you've done that. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Take care.
All right. You're listening to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Joe, your host. And real quick before we end the show, just special thoughts. My friend Gail, I had her on one of my original shows, Generating Gratitude, telling us what it's like to have cancer. My friend Gail passed away late last week, and so if you could please, if you want to put your thoughts towards somebody, I know that she was a tremendous influence on my life, and she was great that she participated on this show, and my thoughts and prayers are to her family today. You're listening to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.